I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone and welcome back to VLGA Connect. It's time for another in our Local Leaders series, and we're heading into Central Victoria today to meet the CEO of Central Goldfields Shire Council, Lucy Roffey. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. How's things going in Central Goldfields at the moment?
Things are going really well. I think one of the most exciting things for us in Central Goldfields at the moment is we're starting to see all of our hard work paying off. So we're starting to see things come out of the ground. And more recently, we've had our art gallery renovated, and it's an award-winning design as well. It's a beautiful gallery. So that opened earlier this year. We have a new skate park, which is very exciting for the local community. And this weekend, we're opening up the new Carisbrook Rec Reserve renovations, which, have added some female-friendly change rooms. So that's a $5 million investment across that site. So another exciting project. And the next one will be our historic Maryborough Railway Station, which I think a lot of people know about, but we've been activating that. So we're going to have a state-of-the-art visitor information centre in there. So it's really exciting just to have all those projects suddenly sort of coming to fruition, and also things that the community can be proud of.
That railway station precinct there it's visually stunning when you go in there, isn't it? It's just one of the most iconic views, I think, in a sort of a civic precinct around the state. And I've had lunch in the cafe there, and I think more and more people are discovering it, aren't they?
Well, that's right. And actually, one of the other things that we spend a bit of time advocating for were more rail services. So we've got more weekend rail services as well into the station, so that we can get more tourists visiting as well. And so we'll have the cafe's just been taken over by new operators, and they are doing a stunning job there. The Visitor Information Centre, as I said, will open up later in the year, and it's going to have an immersive interactive experience around the history of gold, because we are right in the middle of the goldfields there. And also trying to activate some of the spaces too with some art and a sculpture garden. So lots going on there. And it's, sometimes you come to these buildings and they are beautiful, but you don't want to stand there and look at them. So this is trying to get a bit more activity happening within the station so that it becomes a bit more of a visitor experience.
Speaking of significant buildings, I have been reading just recently your Maryborough Town Hall project. You've had a few attempts to contract that, but not unlike many other councils around the state, it's proving a little bit difficult in the current environment. Where are you at with that? Because that's a major project for you, isn't it?
It is. So it's a beautiful historic building, and the challenge, I think, when you have to completely replace the electricals, a lot of the electricians are concerned about their capability to do that. So we've had a difficulty, firstly, in going through a tender process where we weren't as specific about the works, giving them an opportunity really to design and construct. So we went through that process, didn't get much of a response. We then did some more investigative works ourselves, and then we're more specific in our tender, and we still didn't get a great response. I think all we learned at that point was it was going to cost us a lot more than we thought. And now we've gone back through and more of an expression of interest process again to get the capability of organisations that have got heritage experience and are a little less concerned about the risks involved. So it's frustrating for the community and us, because we've had the town hall closed, through COVID, and people want to get back in there and put on performances and have events and all those sorts of things. So we're really hopeful now we've got a way forward, and we'll have it open towards the end of the year or early next year.
Fingers crossed that's the case. We might come back to some local issues if we have time, but one of the things about local leaders is we want to find out a bit more about you. And I've known you for a while, Lucy, but I've learned a couple of things reading up on you. You're an accountant, of course, by trade, and you spent some time in Canada. Tell me about that experience and how you found yourself there.
So, yes, I am a chartered accountant by background, and I had been working in the film industry actually for a number of years. So before going over to Canada, I worked for Village Roadshow and Polygram Film, and I'd sort of fallen into those finance roles after living in London. And really I ended up in Canada because my husband actually was hating what he was doing and was looking for a different career. So we went and lived in Whistler, which is a ski resort about an hour and a half from Vancouver. I lived there for about 3 years. I actually had one of my children there, so my son was born there, and had a fantastic time. And for me, I was looking to do something non-financial as well, so not working in my usual field. And I ran a luxury day spa. So at the time, it was the biggest spa in North America. And I think through that experience, it gave me some experience outside of, as I said, just being a finance person. I had to do all the recruitment for the staff, because you have obviously, an expanding staff over the winter and then shrinking again through to the summer period, but also just customer service. So it was a 5-star resort that we were in, and I was sort of oversighting all of the customer service staff, and some of our customers at that time were people like Goldie Hawn came into the spa one day, Hugh Jackman. So it really was 5-star service, and I think that really stood me in good stead when we returned to Australia, when I picked up Chief Operating Officer role at Australian Centre for the Moving Image, which was sort of combining my finance skills then with more of the whole sort of operational customer service, visitor service experience as well.
That is a unique background for a local government CEO, and it begs the next question. How do you go from running a day spa and working in the moving image space in the film industry to being a local government CEO?
So I then, after we opened ACME, so I was very involved in the redevelopment of ACME over a 4-year period. But again, through that process of going to Canada, my husband became a paramedic. So he was actually a tax lawyer in his previous career. He became a paramedic in Australia, and we really were missing what we had gained from being in Whistler in Canada, which was a small community. So whilst it was a very busy ski resort, there was 8,000 permanent residents outside of the ski period. So we wanted to move to regional Victoria, get back to the outdoors and a bit of space and out of the busyness of Melbourne, and particularly also for my husband as a paramedic, where it was, just relentless. And so we moved into Central Victoria, and I thought, what am I going to do here? And at the time, to be honest, it didn't occur to me to commute into Melbourne, which I think is more doable these days. But at the time I looked, how could I use the skills that I have in a regional setting? And I came across local government, and I had my first role as a director corporate at Hepburn Shire. And I think, most people that work in local government, you fall in love with it pretty quickly. Yeah. It is so varied. And I think probably for me, having not come from a local government background, I just found the collaboration and the support through peers to be really a significant part of being able to come up to speed quickly and feeling like I was really part of the sector.
So from there, Hepburn, I think you were a Bullock for a time also, weren't you, before you ended up at Central Goldfields?
Yeah, well, look, after Hepburn, I actually took a role at similar role, director corporate with Mount Alexander Shire. That was where I was living, and I was there for 7 years. So I spent 7 years in a director role there, working with well-known CEO Phil Rowland, and really enjoyed my time there, and probably then was ready for looking for a CEO role. So first CEO role was with Bullock, and I was there about a year. I found we're actually probably having a difficult time personally at that time, and I was just a bit too far away from family. So when the role at Central Goldfields came up, I took the opportunity to take that role, and I've been there now 5 years as CEO, sort of just about to move into my second 5-year contract.
Yeah. So the role is challenging enough without being in some of these smaller rural places where it is just so much more difficult to get things done with limited resources. What have you learned about being able to make ends meet, for want of a better expression, in councils of that size?
Look, I think we're all still learning. It is really difficult, and most certainly rate capping has been a significant difficulty for small rural councils. What we do, I think, to sort of get around some of those financial constraints is most certainly collaboration. So, whilst we often hear that we don't do it enough, I think we do it actually quite a lot. So we share resources. We work together on a lot of projects with our neighbours, and we have a lot of neighbours. So we work both, Central Goldfields, we're halfway between Ballarat and Bendigo. So we can either work with a whole lot of councils around the Ballarat region or the Bendigo region. So we've got a lot of people to draw on. So it's a really important part of trying to maintain some sustainability. We become very good at grants and grant applications. So I suppose in the time that I've been at Central Goldfields, we've been very successful. And some of those projects I was talking about before, majority of those are grant funded. So I think we've brought in about $25 million in that period in grants for capital works program. And also one of the things I struck when I came to Central Goldfields is the organisation didn't have the funding or the capacity to do strategic work. So we've done a significant amount of strategic work, but again, I've had to draw on about $1 to $2 million in grants to get that work done. We didn't have the resources and the funds to do that ourselves, but it's made, being able to do that strategic work has then made us grant ready for all of the other grants that we've been able to get. So that's how you make the ends meet. A lot of advocacy and a lot of grant writing.
So we've talked about a couple of things on your CV that are unique, I think, for local government CEOs at least. There's another, of course, and that is there's not too many that have been in the position of leading a council out of administration and back to elected representation. Looking back on that process, how do you recall that as a challenge for a CEO?
That challenge I met with again, getting support from other CEOs who had been through the same situation. So moving from administration into elected councillors, you do put a lot of time and effort into thinking about how that will work. It's a big adjustment for the organisation, and the organisation had to obviously go through a lot of change under administration because we had been found to be deficient in a number of areas through the local government inspector report. So there was a lot of change, and then that was another big change process, and ironically it happened in the middle of COVID. So, that sort of added an additional challenge, particularly around getting to know the new councillors. So our new council came in the middle of I suppose towards the end of COVID, when we were still doing a few things online, and they hadn't experienced that. We'd also had the new Local Government Act. And so whilst we had 4 councillors who had been councillors before, not under the Local Government Act 2020. So there were a huge number of challenges, but we planned for it. As I said, I had another CEO who had been through that process present to our leadership team and to share with us their learnings and the planning that they put into it. And, we pass it on, because I then did the same thing for Karen at South Gippsland when she was planning for her transition. So again, it's just that shared knowledge that we have in local government to help us through some of these challenging times. And I have to say the transition's been hugely successful. And I feel that, our council, have been doing a fantastic job, and all of the things we planned for, I think, worked really well.
And I should mention Karen Ellis is going to be a future guest on local leaders, so we'll probably get her thoughts on a similar experience there. One thing that occurs to me about a council CEO in a smaller community like yours is the CEO role is more public than perhaps it is in a metropolitan area. How do you manage that dynamic of being a public figure in a public servant role?
Look, I have to say, it's probably not as public as you think, particularly once we had the councillors back. And as long as, you're supporting your mayor and councillors to be very much the face of council, and they most certainly are in our council. So, you don't see me splashed around everywhere, but you most certainly, probably the positive side is that you have really close working relationships with local leaders. So the local hospital, a lot of the manufacturers, a lot of the other businesses in town and other government departments. I think it's much easier perhaps to get some of those close relationships and, provide that corporate leadership to the community. But most certainly, you still see that the councillors, I think they're closer to the community than they are in some of the metros, and they most certainly are still very much the face of council.
That's true, and that's the answer I was expecting, but it is true also that you're probably more well known as a CEO in a community like yours than some of those bigger council CEOs would be. And that can be a positive, and sometimes it can be a challenge as well, can't it?
Well, I've found it mainly a positive. I haven't found it a huge challenge. And we've actually got a really good working relationship with the local paper. I think you can often see in smaller communities, and I most certainly experienced experienced this in Hepburn. If the local paper is working against you, it can be a very negative experience for everybody. We have a great working relationship with our local paper, and particularly along the lines of saying, this is a great community. How can we celebrate it? We need stories in the paper about the great things that are happening and not the typical council bashing. And I think that's been a really important relationship that we have. And you can feel it in the community. Like, the community are aspirational, they're feeling really positive, and I think that has been just getting those better, more positive stories out there in the local papers.
That's really positive to hear, and I wondered about that community transition also, from not having elected councillors to having elected reps back. How's that process felt to you?
Look, I think it's, it is actually quite difficult when you have administrators that there's 3 of them, and now we have 7 councillors, and there's a lot of work that has to be done out at the community, face-to-face aspect of it. And having councillors is actually really helpful. Often, they're much closer to the community. As I said, there's 7 of them out there doing that work, as opposed to, the administrators. It's really tough running around trying to actually represent everybody with only 3. You would know that, you've been there. Yes. So I think, having councillors back has really helped with that connection to the community, and having them sort of at more events and at more of the local meetings and those sorts of things. So I think it's actually helped, strengthen that connection to the community for us. You
mentioned you're going into your second 5-year contract, so you're looking at a likely sort of 10-year term there. If you see that out, what sort of a legacy are you hoping that you might build over that time, and where are you at on that journey?
Look, I'm really starting to see that legacy. As I said, we're seeing some of these fantastic facilities starting to pop out of the ground or to be improved. And I think for Central Goldfields, we're the lowest socioeconomic community in Victoria on the CEFA index, and there has been in the past a feeling that they've been forgotten and left behind and unloved. And what I'm really seeing now is, as we are actually building and improving these facilities, they're getting the facilities that they deserve as a community, and you can really feel it. And there is that groundswell, I said, of aspiration that they actually, deserve better services and deserve fantastic facilities, as do everybody else. And I think we're starting to see that, and that would hopefully be the legacy that I can leave, is that that they have got fantastic services and facilities. So probably another area for us is starting to do more of that advocacy to ensure we're getting services. So I talked before about even weekend rail, but we need more rail services from Maryborough down to Ballarat on a regular basis, a commuter service, so that people can get to hospitals and get to higher education. At the moment, it's really difficult for people living there. So I think that's another really important part too, is to make sure that they've got great place-based services, so that they can participate, in every part of life, just as everyone else can. So I'm a real advocate for that for all rural communities, but obviously for Central Goldfields.
Commonwealth Games, great disappointment across regional Victoria that it's not happening. Were you expecting any sort of flow-on benefits in Central Goldfields that you'd calculated that you might now not be getting?
Well, I mean, obviously we were right in the middle of Ballarat and Bendigo, so we would have had a big uplift for that period in tourism, with people flowing through from one to the other, whether it was family and friends visiting and adding on some travel, or if it was participants and coaches and everybody moving between the 2 cities. So we did expect a major uplift. Having said that, I think the redistribution of the funding, we will probably get more benefit from in terms of some uplift to some of our sporting facilities and tourism. And one of the most exciting projects that we have in our region is the World Heritage Bid for telling the story of the Goldfields. And I think that it may benefit from the money not now being tied up completely in the Commonwealth Games, but actually being able to be distributed to some fantastic tourism product. So pros and cons always. So maybe not the uplift for that period that we had the competition on, but I think that we will see some other benefits flowing from that investment.
So before I let you go, we've talked about, you've had a couple of major career changes previous to local government and now local government. And I know you're there for some time at Central Goldfields, but what's your ideal next career change if there's one in your future?
Look, I don't know. I love love local government. I think you probably get that from a lot of people that you interview on here. We all love local government, and you know, I think every day is different. The collaboration with all of the other LGAs, and particularly in, you know, for us in regional Victoria, is a fantastic part of being local government. Probably, as you know from my CV, I also have been on, well, I'm on the board of Colaburn and have been a chair there, and I'm involved at the moment with Homes Victoria. So I think probably what I really enjoy is just that breadth, you know, and being able to take on new challenges and to take on new areas, because local government gives you so much experience in such a broad range of things. So I don't know, you never know what's next, but most certainly having some of those board roles is a really important part of my future. You know, we're all getting on, and at some point I'll probably have to move more into that board portfolio career as I sort of start looking towards retirement. I'm probably a bit older than I look, Chris.
I'm not going to go there. Thank you. That's a great answer, though, Lucy. It's been great to speak with you. Really appreciate you giving us your time and being so generous with your thoughts on how things are travelling there, and career-wise as well, as one of our local leaders. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Chris. Really enjoyed it.
That's Lucy Roffey, the CEO at Central Goldfields Shire Council, with us today on Local Leaders from VLGA Connect.